that I am live streaming everywhere I need to be. So just give me 1 second while you all get situated as well. We're so happy that we have options for people to be able to get online. And now I hear myself in double. There we go. I hear myself in double because we are definitely live on YouTube. So sometimes Zoom doesn't cooperate worldwide. Ooh, who am I hearing? Is that me? Okay, I think we're back online. Can you all hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Thank you everybody for joining us. For those of you who are on Zoom, we're super happy you're here. If it doesn't work for some reason, go to our YouTube channel. We are live there as well. And sometimes, like, it wasn't working for me, I'll hop on. You can hop onto Zoom and YouTube and still see what's going on there. For those of you who need Chinese support, we do have 小儿通。如果需要中文服务的话，中文翻译的话。You can go to 小儿通 and here, give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see the codes. So if you need to use your phone right now and QR code, scan these QR codes for either the Chinese or the YouTube link so that you're able to get on. If for some reason Zoom doesn't cooperate, that's the way to do it. Special thank you to everybody who is part of a Tuesday Talk Partner School. We have many of you, and it used to be I could fit, these on one page, and we keep going to a smaller font to try to fit everybody on here. So thank you again for being a supporter of Tuesday Talks and inviting all your friends and families to join us. If you do not see the name of your school on these lists, definitely contact us and say we want to have easy access to these talks. All of these are free, and we're so excited that you're joining us today. Great. Well, without further ado, I want to welcome my colleagues here. They are friends that have traveled with each other and traveled with me for many years. We were just recently talking about how some of us had gone on this VR tour, and then we realized that it was 5 years ago. So, so time has kind of gone by, or actually 6 years ago, really. Time has gone by, and I've gotten to know these friends, and they are just such a delight to be with in person. And so I'm really, I feel very honored that they continue to agree to come on this talk with me every year. So today is going to be one of those ask us anything kind of conversations. And so I'm going to start off by having each of my friends here introduce themselves and tell us a fun fact about yourself, and then we'll dive in. Solomon, why don't you start for us?
Thanks, Gloria. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Solomon Enos from Duke University. I've been at Duke since 2012, so a long time. I don't know. Fun fact, I guess, so I did not move to Duke by myself. And in fact, the reason why we moved over to Durham, North Carolina from San Francisco was because of my now husband, who is a cell biologist by training, but he's in the School of Medicine here as a faculty member. And so, without knowing a lot about Durham and about Duke, everything kind of fell into place. We've been really happy here. And what else? I used to be in a dance company, actually. When I lived in San Francisco, it was hula. So I'm from Hawaii originally. And so that was a big part of my life before moving to North Carolina. So happy to be here. Welcome, everyone.
I didn't know you were in a dance company. That's so fun. See, I learned something new every time. Okay, I'll pass it on to Shane.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I feel like I just have to say that every time we come on camera. My name is Shane McGuire from Vanderbilt University, located in Nashville, Tennessee. I think I just finished my 9th year. I'm starting to lose track of how long I've been here, but excited to join you all. Fun fact about me, I'm a big time golfer, despite the fact that my golf game kind of suffers because I now travel a lot. I'm actually currently coming to you from a hotel in Washington, D.C. So, but super excited. Masters was this past weekend. I don't know if any of you tuned in. It was awesome. Probably my favorite Sunday of the year. Other fun facts, also big coffee guys. I'm sitting here sipping on some local coffee from a shop just down the street. So any city that I go to, always looking for the best coffee that I can find. Happy to do a whole talk on coffee at some point. That's not the point of today, but if you have questions about coffee, feel free to ask me. Happy to talk about that.
Wonderful. Okay, Allie.
Great. Thanks so much, Gloria. Hi, everyone. Good morning from Hanover, New Hampshire. My name is Allie Duke. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an associate director of admission at Dartmouth College. This is my 6th year at Dartmouth, so I've been hanging out here for a little while. Sort of a fun fact, I grew up actually not far away from Dartmouth in southern Vermont, just about an hour away, and intended to move very, very far away when I became a quote unquote grown up, but sometimes life has funny ways of bringing you back around. And my other fun fact is that I am dog sitting today. So if you hear any little woofs or good girls in the background, you can actually see her right here in the corner. I am not talking to myself. I am talking to my furry friend for the day. But really happy to be here, and thanks for getting us together, Gloria.
Yeah. And Christy.
Hey, that's me. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Callahan, and I represent Northwestern University right outside the great city of Chicago in Evanston, Illinois. I've been with Northwestern for about 10 years, and I've been in admissions for about 15. So that's my fair share of application reviews, but I'm not stopping there. So I'm excited to be with you today. The VR tour that Gloria mentioned, fun fact, I was on that, and it just charmed me beyond words to travel China with the Initial View team and go on trains, planes, and automobiles throughout a lot of the cities that I had not yet been to. One, I got to stop in Chengdu and go to the research base for giant pandas and spent the whole day just kind of wandering by myself. Also, I was gifted on that trip a stuffed panda, and I was lucky to have enough room in my luggage to put him in my bag. So he's been in my office. But this past week, my daughter, who just turned 5, because I was actually pregnant on that trip, and Gloria and Terry would not let me carry my own bag. They were very, very coveted. So my daughter and I had been to, in utero, had been to China 5 years ago. She then adopted that panda last week at my office and took it home. So, so he's now affectionately called Pandy, and he's here. But so our travels live with us. We love them. I've been to, over 70 countries and exploring the world in each one, even when we return, because I went to China for the first time as a student in 2004. And every time we get to return, it's just amazing to get to meet new students, new people, new places, and new iterations of countries from all over the globe. So thank you, Gloria, for gathering us today.
Yeah, very fun. And I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Gloria. I'm one of the co-founders of Initial View, host of Tuesday Talks. And fun fact about myself, there was once upon a time that I was recruited to be in a Asian American female pop group in New York. So that was like a little bit fun, and but that was a lifetime ago. I still enjoy singing, but maybe not in that style. Well, it's so fun to get to see you all. It's so fun to kind of have this human element. And I know I would be more inclined if the students and the parents and the counselors were actually, we were able to see their faces as well. But if the way to kind of make us feel like you're here is to actually open up your chat box and open up your Q&A box. And right away now here, I'd love for you all to go ahead and type in some of your questions, because we want this conversation to be about what you care about. And so we want you to go ahead and start asking them. And some of them will be similar, so we can kind of fold them together and have questions answered more efficiently that way. And I'll moderate it. And we're just gonna have a great conversation. And as we dive in, I know that a lot of people are here because of the names of your institutions. So I would love for each of you to maybe, a question that often comes up in Tuesday Talks is like, maybe tell me about a special tradition at your school, or maybe what's something that makes, that makes your school unique, or that we would find interesting. So I know there are tons of wonderful things about each of your institutions, but if you guys can come up with one kind of interesting fact, fun fact, unique aspect that's attractive to a lot of the students on your campus, we'd love to hear that. So I'll go the opposite way. Christy, do you want to start with Northwestern?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll start kind of broad and let my colleagues kind of dig in on more details. We just had our visit day event for all admitted students yesterday. So 900 people joined us on our campus. It was just exciting to see all the purple. We have a lot of purple pride at Northwestern. We occupy a unique space at Northwestern where we're highly selective and high accomplishing top research institution, but we also do a lot of other things very well. And so I think what we are proud at Northwestern is that we have Samir, who was on stage, just welcoming the class and welcoming the students, was talking about how one of his first jobs out of college was working on the then unknown campaign for Barack Obama. He ended up working in the White House. He ended up coming back to campus and doing his MBA and combining with some of our McCormick School of Engineering students to found his own regenerative battery business that is quite impactful here in Chicagoland. They planted a campus in the West Loop and the South Loop, and then also in Japan. So he's an international businessman, but he also has friends that he referenced that have won Tony Awards and that have competed internationally in athletics. And so I think the special thing about Northwestern is that there's a through line through what we do at Northwestern between our School of Communication, our School of Beanin School of Music, our 10 different ways to study business, and 6 of the different colleges at Northwestern. And I just think that there's a lot of different of thoughts, and that's the beauty of the education system in the United States with that liberal arts approach. But at Northwestern, he was a perfect example on stage, kind of like rattling off his like resume of taking different directions, and also just introducing us to the concept at Northwestern that like your peers and all the things that they're studying are kind of influencing where you take those different thoughts. So even if you come in as economics or neuroscience or theater, you're going to take a lot of different trajectories. And so that's what we love about Northwestern. There's also like this energy and spirit. Even as I speak about it, I can feel all that purple pride. So I guess that's what I'd like to say about Northwestern as a special place, is this through line of kind of combining a lot of different contradictory fields into new trajectories for our students. So yeah.
Wonderful. How about Dartmouth, Allie?
Yeah, there's so many fun traditions to choose from. It's hard to pick just one, but I would love to introduce Dartmouth through one of our classic traditions, which is first year trips. So Christy mentioned this idea of a liberal arts education. Dartmouth is also a liberal arts school. We're sort of a small liberal arts college, really rooted in teaching you how to think versus what to think, giving you a lot of flexibility. And I think a sense of exploration and sort of adventuresome spirit is really ingrained in what we do. And a great example of that is our first year trips program. So if you're unfamiliar with Dartmouth's location, sort of triangulated between Boston, Montreal, and New York City. Even though you can be in any of those cities within a few hours driving time, we ourselves are located in a bit more of a rural, sort of quintessential college town. There's a lot of green space. We're actually the largest landowner in the state of New Hampshire, and we make great use of that by having our entire first year class come to campus about 5 days before you start traditional orientation. And we split you up into your various first year trips. Now there's a trip for everyone. If like me, you are a little less outdoorsy inclined, there are trips like going to the organic farm or cabin camping or yoga in the woods. Or if like many of our students, you are really eager to engage with the surrounding area, you might do a trip like hiking 3 or whitewater rafting. So really a wide range of trips for whatever your comfort level is. And you arrive to campus, you meet your small group, and we basically send you out on your trip for the next 3 nights. And it is miraculous how quickly you will make friends with folks when you have no cell phones and no showers. And then on your last night, you all come back together with other members of your class at Mount Moosilauke Lodge, which is one of the 2 mountains that Dartmouth owns. And there's lots of singing and dancing and some secret traditions that I won't ruin should any of you matriculate at Dartmouth someday. But it's a really nice way of bringing the community together before you even start orientation. Community is something that is incredibly important to us. It's a really warm, kind place to attend college. And so then when you do go into orientation and you want to go to, the dining hall with someone or movie night on the quad, you already have that group of folks who you've made that connection with before you even start that official programming. So many students look back on it super fondly and have made some of their best friends through first year trips. And I think it's something that's pretty uniquely Dartmouth.
Wonderful. All right, Mandy.
All right. I think I'll go with lots to choose from, as everyone has said, but I think I'll go with our Founders Walk, which is one of the first things that you will take part in as a student. So if you were to Google like Vanderbilt Move-In Day, there's actually all these videos out there of sort of the excitement that comes around moving. I mean, everyone is there greeting you as you kind of come to campus, including our chancellor, our provost, helping everyone move in. The first year experience actually has sort of these 10 houses that everyone is spread out between. The faculty head of house lives in each of those. So you're actually living with faculty in this sort of residential experience. They're there to sort of welcome you. But once everyone is settled in and kind of moved in, the first tradition you take part in is called this Founders Walk, where you gather on the lawn outside of these residence halls and you make this sort of march across campus with all the upperclassmen sort of lining this pathway, welcoming you to campus. And I think that really embodies sort of this welcoming spirit that you find, this sort of community, this collaboration. And you arrive on our alumni lawn, and that is actually where you all gather as a first year class, probably one of the few times you're all together, to hear from sort of the chancellor, the provost, to sort of kick off your experience, to sort of lay the groundwork for your 4 years. And that same lawn is also where we do a really cool outdoor graduation sort of in that experience. So it kind of begins and ends your experience at campus. But I think one thing I love about our community is how quickly you will feel welcome, how quickly you will feel at home, and really be in this amazing community that's also right in an amazing city as well that our students love. So I could go on. There's many, many unique things, but I think that sort of experience kind of kicks off life at Vanderbilt.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Duke.
Yeah, you're going to hear a consistent theme here of community. I think, all of these schools will offer you a strong sense of community. I mean, Duke is no different. If you come to campus, I think one of the first things that you'll notice is just everyone wearing Duke sweatshirts, Duke t-shirts, Duke blue. It's really, you can't escape it. And I think it's a sign of how much pride there is in being a Duke Blue Devil. There's a tradition that happens every year, and it's kind of one of the things that you must do before you graduate. I'm from Hawaii originally, and I don't think I would participate in this tradition necessarily because it requires being outdoors in the cold. For weeks. And so there's the tradition is tenting. It's so if you look up Duke tenting, you'll come up with pictures of these tents in front of Cameron Indoor Stadium. Of course, Duke is known for its basketball, and so we call our most ardent student fans Cameron Crazies, and they are crazy. They set up tents and they camp out essentially to get in front of the line to get into the UNC Duke game. And so there are certain rules that you need to follow. And there's Wi-Fi out there so you can do your work. And you take turns essentially. You're not there for weeks. You take turns shuffling in and out of the tents. But they're there for a long time, and it's winter. So, but I think that gives you a sense of, how strong this community is and how much students love being here, to the point where they will go out and be in their tents for a very long time just to get into the UNC Duke game, which is a big deal here. So really strong sense of community here at Duke as well.
Wonderful. And so great that we have, some of it is thanks to COVID, but we have so many resources out there. So for those of you whose ears, perked up or, some interest was piqued about some of the things that these colleagues mentioned, they have videos and pictures and things on their website and their socials that you can kind of experience a little bit of what they're talking about. And as we always say, find a current student. Like, they are going to be the best people to talk to about kind of the vibe of the school. If you're looking for what's the vibe at these schools, they have a lot of similarities, but they also have some differences that you will be able to find out when you talk to students. So make sure you do that if you haven't done that already. We have quite a few questions here about majors. And so I just wanted to really ask you all, what's the best way to figure out what majors each of your schools offer? I'm assuming there's a place on your website, but do you have recommendations if people are like, do you have this major? Do you have this major? What's the best way to find that out?
Yeah, Christy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, our websites have a plethora of A through Z listings. A lot of them are organized based on the colleges that we each have represented, which are the colleges at our universities are kind of like a breakdown of academic areas that then the administration of that college can have more autonomy over, as far as the delineation of different number of courses that you're going to take, the directives of thesis and like research opportunities and kind of foundational level courses. I think sometimes people get confused about that term university and college in the United States, but if you go on our websites, you can dig in based on kind of subject areas, which are some of those larger colleges, or A through Z on a lot of our websites. The thing about, since I've been working in university admissions that surprises me is that as an 18-year-old, a 17, 18, 16, 17, 18-year-old, it's impossible to know what every single major that exists out there. And then we throw in things like minors too, which is like a major, it's an area of concentration, but you take a little bit less coursework to kind of master that area and get a minor. We also have things in the American system that confuse you even further, which is like certificates and things like that are kind of like a sampling of curriculum to give you something under your belt for your resume, something that's qualified and a tool for you in your career, but is not going to take as much time as a major. So many of you'll have a degree in a specific major, and then in the United States, we want you to kind of like figure out where that major relates to in our systems. And that's why we've each talked about in the college and university settings that we represent. But yeah, online is a great spot. But again, remember, just because you have one thing in mind doesn't mean that won't transfer into other things or translate into other things on our campuses, which is kind of what we want to happen. Lots of students come and change their majors, and that's okay in the United States system. I'll repeat, that's okay. In the US system. So just know you don't have to have it all figured out at the point of entry.
Well, and that was my next question is, do students have to pick a major when they apply to your institution?
No, so they do not have to pick our major until the end of their sophomore year. So I think all of us are kind of liberal arts and sciences universities at our core, and we want students to have the freedom to take a number of courses and to take their time before they declare a major. And in fact, I think our advisors would probably encourage students to pursue lots of different things before they make that final decision. I wanted to go back and just go back to the previous question, because there's a website. I'm going to put I used to be a college counselor before I'm going back to being an admissions officer. And there's a great website put out through the National Center for Education Statistics through the US Department of Education called College Navigator. So if you go to collegenavigator.gov, it essentially kind of aggregates all of the statistics for all of our schools, but for almost every school in the United States. And so, looking up Duke, for instance, there is a button where you can unpack the programs and majors section, and it not only will give you the majors, minors, and certificates that we offer, but it will also give you the number of students that are enrolled in each major or minor. So if you want to see where, what our most popular majors are, or what most popular majors are at Vanderbilt, for instance, I mean, it would be a good place to start. It gives you lots of really good information that is accurate.
Thank you for that. Well, so as we're talking about applying, of course, people have questions about what makes students stand out. And we've talked multiple times, and if y'all go back to our archives even, you'll see lots of talks about holistic review and how admissions officers look at your applications. But of course, this is going to have to be a question here. I guess, I think everybody knows that you all are very selective schools. So obviously academic fit is going to be the first question. But as you all have mentioned in previous talks, I mean, what's the percentage? Majority of the applications you get, students are academically qualified. Is that right? Okay. So then we want to talk about the intangibles. People want to know, like, okay, we're assuming that our academics there. So what else catches your eye? What makes you think, okay, I'm going to give this application a second look, or we definitely want to bring this up in committee, or that kind of thing? What triggers that kind of emotion when you look at an application?
Happy to jump in here. I think this is sort of the $1 million question, right? If we had the perfect answer to this, we could sell it. And it's tough because there is no one right answer. Gloria, you did mention the academics piece, and I know that people love to talk about the academics, so I'm happy to sort of start there. Again, Gloria, you mentioned this, but 70 to 80% of applicants to Dartmouth are academically qualified to come to the school. You could sit on campus in a classroom and do the work. We are not able to admit 70 to 80% of our applicants. So it's really moving sort of past that academic step and into these intangibles. And that I would venture to feel comfortable to speak for all of my colleagues to say that is really what excites us, right? I don't roll out of bed in the morning and say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to look at 800s on the SAT today or all A's on a transcript. Like, that's not why we do this work. It's really understanding who you are, what you care about, what role you're going to fill on any one of our campuses. Because when you arrive, you aren't just a student. You aren't just sitting in a classroom. In fact, a majority of your time will be spent outside of the classroom. So we want to know what sort of community member you are, how you interact with others, who are you going to be as, a lab partner or a roommate or a club co-leader. And for me, what really stands out in those spaces are students who are authentic to themselves, who really tell their story in a way that is truthful to who they are. I usually like to joke, if you are intellectual, great, be intellectual. If you're funny, be funny. If you're not funny, this is not the time to try, right? We really want to hear about who you are going to be when you arrive. And I think Saul actually is the one who said this one time, where I think there's a misperception that you have to be a perfectly well-rounded student to attend any one of our schools, and that's not the case. But we are looking to create a perfectly well-rounded class. So we are looking for a lot of puzzle pieces to sort of round out that class and that community, but there's no one right way to stand out. It really is just being sort of authentic to who you are and being thoughtful in how you are communicating with us through your application.
I can just jump into, it's really hard sometimes to talk about like the intangibles and to like pinpoint exactly what those things are. Our dean helps us out, in terms of like kind of helping us to when we're reviewing applications. He provides us with the 4 I's. And so I'm happy to kind of share those 4 I's with you just to get a sense, like, it's still, It's still not really specific, but it does give you a sense of what helps students stand out. So the first I is intellect, and Ali mentioned this already. We're looking for students who are intellectually curious. The second I is imagination. So we're looking for students who can imagine the unknown. I mean, that's for someone who's 18 years old, that's really hard. And so that's something that can help students stand out. Integrity is important to us as well. We want to make sure that students are who they are, their authentic selves. And then impact is the fourth I. So, students who have made positive contributions to their community. And community, is broadly defined. Your community could be sports, it could be leadership at school, it could be at church, it could be, really could be anything. And we're looking for, again, like Ali was saying, so many puzzle pieces. We're looking to build a well-rounded community where students are interesting, and they will bring these four I's to make a really strong community. So I don't know if those four I's help, but at least it's kind of something to anchor,
Those are great.
I'll just jump in. Yeah, I'll just jump in on. I'll add a fifth I. I'll introduce this fun topic. But Ali and Saul sort of talked about things that intangibles that we look for, but there's also this institutional priorities piece, which I can throw out. I know, getting crazy, right? But you may look at all of our schools, and on paper, we look similar in a lot of ways in terms of sort of the numbers, in terms of sort of the communities, some of that. But each of us have different institutional priorities that are at play, things that, and it's a huge benefit that we have so many amazing applicants in our pool, that we have that ability to say, who do we really want in this class? How are we shaping this class? And what are sort of the priorities that we have in terms, and these could be all sorts of different things. These could be different schools or majors that we are filling. This could be geographic representation, whether that's across the United States or across the world. All these different pieces of the puzzle, again, that they've hinted at, we sort of have that lens on our side of things as well. You can't always control institutional priorities. But what you can do is what Saul and Ali have both hinted at, is put your best foot forward, be your authentic self, tell us that story the best you can in the application. And then on our end, we can see if you're really sort of a fit for what we're truly looking for in that class.
So, I mean, we've talked about, I think a lot of people are anxious as a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, of just not knowing our authentic story, not being entirely sure. Like, I'm interested in a lot of subjects. I like learning a lot of things. I don't really have kind of a academic interest path. Like, how would I present to you that if I don't know that? So any kind of advice on that? And do you all, when you read, do you see that, like, oh, this person's still kind of exploring, yet I see the four I's? Can you kind of give maybe an example of that, or any advice on how to kind of approach that?
Yeah, I can jump in here and just say that although the US application is designed differently than a lot of the other places around the world that you will apply, and when we say differently, we recognize that it does require a lot of work. So we want you to understand that each of the parts of the application that we are asking to receive from you is actually kind of trying to suss out some of those I's, right? And it's giving you different examples of different places to kind of display them about yourself in different capacities, right? So the extracurricular activities start, the honors, the essays. Some of us give different iterations of the essays, meaning that we want to hear different things from you. Having an initial view is an opportunity for you to say it in a different way, right? And so it's saying it in your own voice, an unscripted manner, demonstrating it in that manner. And so each of those areas of that very complex common application or coalition application, or any application that the US is asking to receive, is actually trying to get to those different parts of you. And so we're not trying to make it more difficult. So I would just encourage you, if there's a part of the application that's giving you the most headache or is causing the most strain, try to break yourself out of kind of, how do I fit this? And start saying, how does this piece fit me, right? How is this allowing me to demonstrate and exhibit myself as part of this application? And so don't get so stuck into the rigidity of the application, because you don't fit a specific number of characters or a specific number of way to say something. There's no essay that some students actually do this. They actually write an essay about what they think we want to hear. And it becomes very bland. And when we're reading 50,000 essays next to each other, you'd be surprised at how little of the student is actually in that versus what they think we want to hear, which is like a certain structure or certain delivery of an item or 3 specific points about Northwestern and things like that. That's not what we're looking for. And so just make sure that each part has you in it as part of it to suss out those eyes. And that's what we're trying to do in asking you for those requirements. But I'll let my colleagues keep going with that.
I want to jump on top of what Christy was saying there. And I know that when you walk into this process, it feels intense. It feels like a lot of pressure. When I sit down and think about what I would write about if I were to apply to college right now, I'm like, wow, like I am overwhelmed just thinking about it. The first step that I would encourage you to take is thinking about, if we were to sit down and just have a one-on-one conversation, what are the most important things about you that I should walk away from that conversation knowing? Maybe it's your academic interest. Maybe it's that you are a national chess champion. Maybe it's that you have a really close relationship with your grandmother. Whatever it might be, those are the things that we're trying to learn. So it might be helpful before you even get into the common application, just sit down and write down a list of things that you think are important to you and that you want to make sure that we walk away from your application understanding. And hopefully that will help inform what the content is of those essays. So you don't just sit down to write those supplements and are sort of racking your brain for what a topic is that might be appropriate. You already have a list of things that you can fall back on and say, well, this feels like a really good match for this, or this feels like it could slot in well here. And just ensure that all of those things that are on that top priority list for you are incorporated in your application somewhere, because that's our job, is to understand your story at the end of the day. You know, when we're sitting there reading applications, I want to get to the end and be able to feel like I know that person, not just as a piece of paper, but as a real live human being who's going to show up on our campus. So enable us to do our best advocacy on your behalf by being really clear on what you want to share and what you want us to get out of that process.
I will also add, I think sometimes students feel like they need to know exactly what they want to do. They need to know the exact path that they need to take. And of course, I think probably at all of our institutions, I can speak for Duke for myself as an advisor. I'm a college advisor for first year and sophomores. You know, there are students that are like, I'm going to double major in public policy and biology, and I'm going to do pre-med, and in 4 years I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to medical school, and after I'm going to do that, I'm going to, you know, and they have this linear path. And I think as an advisor, you know, I'm often like, you know, college, so many opportunities here, resources, like, why don't you, like, I know that you love to do, you know, you love the arts. Why don't you like pursue that as well? And I think college, at least in the United States, it's a really great opportunity at all of these institutions to just explore what you like. And so from an admissions perspective, it's sometimes very refreshing to see a student that is open, you know, that is open to trying new things. That is maybe curious, you know, that asks good questions, you know, you know, because that student, I think we can see that student, we can picture that student really taking full advantage of opportunities at our institutions. And so in some ways that student can really stand out amongst a very, very competitive applicant pool.
Sorry. I wanted to go back to institutional priorities, Shane, because somebody else asked a question about that as well. Given that most of our audience, not everybody, but most of our audience is from from a different country. And I know that in and of itself is a different area, like you are, the context is different, and maybe your schools and different years want a different diversity of student coming to campus. So can you speak to that a little bit? I have a question here where some independent consultants or agencies are now even saying, like, maybe you should move to another country, because you'll have a better chance to get in if you go. And maybe you just go to the US earlier, because if you go to a different type of high school in the US, you might have a better chance to, like, could you speak to that? Like, how does the institutional priority really weigh into the review process? And then, we'll kind of go back to, I think a lot of people are approaching this process, 9th grade, 10th grade already being like, well, I'm going to take a certain kind of class, go to a certain kind of place, without really kind of taking the approach that Ali just said, which is take a piece of paper and just write down what really is meaningful to you. And instead we're being kind of boxed in here and being like, well, based on what I've heard last year, I should maybe move to another country. So any thoughts or, insights based on what I just asked?
I'll take a stab at this since I introduced institutional priorities, but I'll let others jump in here. So let me start by saying you do not need to pick up and move anywhere in this process to get a leg up or an advantage in the admissions process. But to give you a little bit more of a specific example through sort of the international lens of possible institutional priorities, and I'm sure all of us have different kind of priorities within this, but looking through sort of like the Vanderbilt lens, like since I have been there, it used to be about 8% of our class that was international from across the world. And since I've been there, we have been given sort of the priority of increasing that number, getting that up to being close to 11 or 12% of our class. And also within that, diversifying sort of the citizenship representation on campus. We currently are sitting at, I think, 76 citizenships, but like there's now a goal of pushing that upwards to, 90 or 100 represented in our undergraduate population. So when I'm approaching the applications, I'm thinking about how can I get students with different citizenships, different representation across the world coming to our campus, because we want that perspective. We want that in our class. But in all honesty, I'm looking at that from more of a citizenship perspective. So, even if you have a certain citizenship and you move to a different country because you think that's going to give you a leg up, not necessarily in that process, but also looking at more than just the citizenship itself. I'm also looking at sort of the cultural perspective, looking at sort of the context that a student is coming from and thinking about how are they going to bring that to our campus? What perspective is going to come that way? And it goes back all to what we've been talking about, this authenticity piece, right? You want to sort of let that come through your application. So it's very clear to us, wow, this is the impact. This is the insight, the perspective that this student could bring, sort of the background that they're going to bring to our campus. So continue to find ways to let that shine through your application. We're not giving an advantage to students that decide to move to the United States earlier to sort of do that. Again, it's all about you within the context that you're coming from, whether that's in the US, whether that's in a particular country, whatever it is. What perspective, what sort of, impact are you going to sort of make in that space and then potentially bring to our community? I don't know if that helps answer it, but that's how I'll start with that, and I'll let others chime in.
I'll just add some further complexity. So this might add further frustration, but I say it gently, is that each year we cannot predict what our pool is going to look like. So part of institutional priorities is also how our institutional pool, applicant pool, looks each year, right? And that changes, that variable changes based on where all of you from all over the world decide to actually push submit and kind of move forward. It also has a lot to do with lots of different balancing acts at our universities with new programs and majors and research. I see a question in here about restrictions on students from certain countries studying certain things. That doesn't happen here in the United States. We don't get directives like that. So that's an absolute no. But we do have directives to, like Shane was talking about, diversify the type of thought that's coming to our campus. We also have challenges from our administration. The U.S. university system is pretty complex, and it was for a long time exclusive to certain populations, even in the United States, right? And so many of us, and how our institutional priorities are coming about and unfolding, and how we're trying to charge forward at universities like ours, that we're very, very privileged to have the resources and the reputations that we have, is trying to break those boundaries and barriers and challenges for students, to bring those students to our campus. So just keep in mind that you cannot control those. Many of us can't even control them. And year to year, those change. So the main point is, don't try to go out there and alter yourself of who you are to fit something that you can't even predict, right? The better use of your time as a student is to just think about what inspires you, what excites you, what kind of creates this flutter inside of you, what creates this part of conflict that you're like, wait, I like this subject, but I also like that, or I'm really inspired by what my peer is doing, and how can I do that in the same way in my setting? So that's what we're trying to get at in large, incredible institutions like ourselves, is bringing together that group of students that are inspired to take their own path. And that can be a different way for each person. But I just want to candidly say that the institutional priorities are ever changing. You can't predict them. And so don't try to fit into some sort of box. Find a university that's going to fit into what you want. And that's ultimately what we're at right now, with the regular decision applications being admitted. And now everybody gets to decide, right? But I will say that if there is a school that you want, that is right for you, a lot of us have early options for that purpose, and that sometimes is an institutional priority at our institutions. So I'll say that is for Northwestern. We love students that want Northwestern #1, and we highly value our early decision program. But that's us, right? There's different programs that are early based on that system. So I don't know if that takes the conversation in a different direction, but institutional priorities are complicated.
And I think it speaks to, I think what we've all been trying to get at is, like, when we talk about fit, and that was kind of the name of this talk, like, what really is fit. I think a lot of students and families, we want to shove ourselves into what we think you want. And I think we're trying to have this conversation of like, no. Like, you be who you are, and we'll determine whether or not that puzzle piece fits that particular year. Because one puzzle piece might fit in this year, but next year really kind of doesn't, based on the other applicants that also apply. So coming at it from, like, even these questions of, like, trying to figure out where you sit in the context of your context, like where you sit in your context, is almost too much. It's like us really trying to be this puzzle piece. We're trying to, like, shove our puzzle piece into your puzzle. And I think why we have these conversations at Tuesday Talks is to try to really kind of get at, like, instead of saying, how can I shave myself into this puzzle piece? It's more about, like, exploration of who you are and asking yourself the right questions. So I just want to kind of highlight that, like, you're not going to be able to control. And somebody's here is asking, how do I, align my traits with your values? And I'm not sure that's the right question, but any thoughts on that? How does a student try to align their traits with your values?
I don't know that they necessarily. Oh, Saul, go ahead.
Well, I'll start, and then Shane, if you want to say. I'm going to echo what Gloria said. Like, I don't really feel like that's the way to do it. And in fact, I think also, I mean, this process is difficult, and it can feel downright brutal sometimes, I think, because you are putting yourself out there, and you're putting yourself, hopefully your authentic self out there. for admission officers to render a final decision of whether or not you can be a part of our community. And I'm putting my college counselor hat back on. And I just want to emphasize to everyone here that's here today that, like who you are is enough. And who are we to judge you, whether or not you are enough. And, a lot of times the reason why, and we talked about the competitive applicant pool being competitive, the most of the time, it's not because student was deficient in some way. It's because we have a limited number of seats each year in our class, and we have to make these really difficult decisions. And I'm sure all of us feel the same way when we have to make these really difficult decisions of not admitting a student. And we were looking at the academic profile, and these students you're so great, and yet we still have to. We were not able to offer you admission. I know that you're going to land at places, that are going to be so wonderful, because you've done your homework and you found the right fit, and it's going to be okay. So I just all I'm saying is you're enough. If the school that if schools don't offer you admission, then it's their loss. And I think that's okay. That's okay. You're enough.
I would love to piggyback off of that a little bit, Saul. And I always like to remind students too that there are 4,000 and some institutions in the US alone. So at the very top part here, you are actually being far more selective than we are, right? Because you are choosing how many, maybe 8, 12, maybe a few more than that, institutions to apply to out of those 4,000 plus more across the world. So you are also being selective in this process. You are also choosing us. And then just to sort of say in another way what I think Saul was saying, and I remind students of this all the time, that a no from one of our institutions does not mean that you are not a good, kind, smart person who is going to go on and do really incredible things at the end of the day. An admission or a denial from one of our schools does not in any way, shape, or form determine your worth as a human being. And I think that is really, really important to remember. And I would also encourage you to keep in mind that we all work in the office of admissions, not the office of denials. We don't do this because we get any sort of joy about sitting around and saying no, right? It is the work of the work, and it is the reality when you have admit rates that sit around where all of ours do. But we are looking for reasons to say yes. You need to remember that on the other end of this process is someone who really is doing their best to try and advocate for you. And sometimes that's successful and that's amazing. And other times it's just not that puzzle match that year. But again, that in no way, shape, or form determines your worth as a human being.
And I think we're saying be the best version of yourself. And if you feel like the pressure is too much to that the best of yourself is just not cutting it for this kind of competitiveness, then maybe you want to take a step back and just be maybe that's not the school I want to go to, because if I'm in that environment with those types of people and I'm just always feeling pressure, then maybe that's not the college life that you're looking for. Now, if you are, then you put your best foot forward, right? You put your best foot forward, but you do, and we will have another talk about this, of creating a balanced list. You think about selectivity of the schools that you're applying to, and really have more than just these 4 choices at this table right now. And I know that's really hard, and especially in a different country where there are different expectations of what your college degree provides for you in the future, what that looks like on your resume. I know that's a lot of pressure, but I would encourage you to talk to some other adults who've gone through the process and who maybe, I didn't get into my dream school, and then I ended up at a school that was great for me, perfect for me, and I'm really grateful for that. And at the moment when I got some rejections, I was definitely sad, but in the end, now years out, you can kind of look back and be like, oh no, that was a great closing of a door and opening of another. So just want to really encourage you all, because I know it's really stressful, but I think the real message here is I just feel like all these questions are like, well, what can I do in my extracurricular that will stand out? And what can I do with this grade that will make me stand out? And I think it's known, like you will stand out because you ultimately are authentically doing the thing that you are excited about doing, and will be able to contribute to the intellectual curiosity, to the imagination, to the integrity, and to the impact of the community. So I could talk about this all day long, clearly. But any other advice? We're down to 5 minutes, and any other advice on how? I think, okay, so a better way to say this, and this is great to the student who's clarifying their question, maybe it's not just to stand out, but what would make authenticity come through? Maybe that's a better question. Instead of saying, like, how do I stand out? Meaning, like, what extracurricular activity should I have? Maybe it's advice on how do I make sure my story is being told in an authentic way? Any advice on that?
Make sure that you are the first and final editor on any writing pieces that you submit. I think someone at one of your institutions has mentioned that at some point in time. I think sometimes we read application essays and we say, this sounds like it was written by a 40-year-old man, not a 17-year-old high schooler. And usually the answer is because it was, or it was heavily edited by one. Make sure that your voice isn't lost in the writing. Make sure that it sounds like you. I usually encourage students to find like maybe 2 or 3 really trusted people to edit their writing. But if you're having 10 different people look at your personal statement, by the end, it's probably going to become more a conglomeration of what, their perspectives and points of view are versus what is really true to who you are.
I'll chime in about sort of the, you're asking like, what activities should I do? When you're thinking about your activities, when you're doing it, ask yourself, do I enjoy doing this? Am I passionate about it? Am I interested in it? Do I want to try it out because this just sounds amazing? I mean, all of those things are authentic to who you are, right? If you're doing stuff for the right reasons, just make sure that's always, ask yourself that question, like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I enjoy it, or am I doing it because I think a college or university wants to see that? And if it's that latter, then you shouldn't be doing it. If you're doing it because, yeah, this is enjoyable, I can see myself thriving in this space, I can make an impact here, I want to explore this more, use those questions to guide those things, and that will help the authenticity ultimately come through when you sit down to fill out that application.
I like to say that use each part of the application to demonstrate a different part of you. So make sure you're not just repeating the same thing in your personal essay and your institutional essay and your essay for Initial View or for Duolingo or whatever you're taking. Each one can highlight different attributes of you. And you might be really excited about one thing that you're doing, but show us the different sides of you, the multidisciplinary side, the multi-dimensions of what you're doing and how you relate it to different parts of your life. I would say that do something that's like unplanned to stretch yourself in as you're kind of going through the application process, like unscripted, right? That's what Initial View, that's why we love Initial View, is the unscripted nature of it. So even practice that with some of your peers, with some of the people in your life, the adults in your life, and take on different type of formats of that instead of just like one stiff kind of approach to writing or to kind of highlighting yourself.
I'm just gonna end it by saying, I think an Initial View interview is a really good way. And I mean that. I think it's a good way to kind of show up and to show admissions committees what who you are and what you're about. So it's a great opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I know that there were a lot of very specific questions about the application, and we are going to get to those in this series of Tuesday Talks. In May, the first, I think it's May 9th, we're actually going to do a study where admissions officers are going to look at a few applications and let you all look at a little bit of it to see what kind of conversation happens in the room when people are looking at the different components of your application. So if you're curious about that, just keep coming back. We're going to be talking about all these things. As always, there are specific questions about institutions. Each of these institutions have so much information on their websites. They have their own kind of visits and like virtual visits and things like that you can do and talk to current students. So please reach out to them as well if there's something very specific about those colleges that have interested you. Solomon, Shane, Allie, Chrissy, always super wonderful to be with you. You guys have such great insight and I really appreciate your time. Everybody else, I'm going to hang on here for another 15, 20 minutes or so, because I know that some people have some questions about Initial View. If you have questions about Initial View, I'm happy to be here to answer those questions. So if you'd like to stay on, welcome to stay on, but I'm going to let my colleagues go because they have lots of admitted student things to do and getting ready for a whole nother recruitment cycle. So thank you once again for your time. We really enjoyed it. See you all. And everybody else, see you next week at Tuesday Talks. Hi, everyone. All right, if you are hanging on and would like to know a little bit about Initial View, I'm happy to answer questions. So go ahead and put in the chat or in the Q&A if you have any questions. What kind of questions will be asked during the interview? Great. Just for reference for those who've never heard of Initial View, you probably just heard about this talk and hopped on. Initial View is a third-party interview platform. So we have interviewers that are trained. I help with the training process. And these are interviewers that used to be college counselors, admissions officers, teachers, educators. They're really familiar with talking to students. And you have a nice 15-minute or so conversation. It's recorded. And that can be sent to as many schools as you wish when you apply as part of your application process. And as Christy mentioned, I mean, all 4 of those institutions that were just on the talk, they all accept Initial View. They all use it in the review process. A lot of them kind of listen in the background while they're reading your application. So it's a great way for you to tell your story and make sure that your voice, your actual voice, is being heard. So what kind of questions will be asked? You want to think about kind of the goals of an interview more than the actual questions. And the goal of the interview is to let the admission officer understand who you are a little bit. So as Solomon mentioned, you know, for them, 4 I's, I felt that was really helpful. Intellect, imagination, integrity, and impact. So the questions are actually going to give you an opportunity to highlight some of that. So for example, intellect or intellectual curiosity is what many admissions officers say. That really is just a way of saying, have you been able to engage with academic material and really like pursue it, find it interesting, you know, get better at it. Those are all things. So when an interviewer asks you a question about what kind of classes you are taking, what kind of classes you want to take, what kind of, what's your favorite subject? Those are all kind of opportunities for you to grab and then say, yeah, I'm going to talk about how this excites me. I'm going to talk about how I really dove into this research. I'm going to talk about how I was able to like bring a friend into this new subject and really have an interesting, exciting discussion about it. These are the ways that you can show that. You know, for example, impact, that's going to be important. So our interviewers might ask you, what kind of things do you do in your community? Or what kind of, what outside of class takes up your time? What do you enjoy doing in your free time? Those are all opportunities for you to show a little bit of impact or a little bit of imagination. And so earlier I knew there was a question about, you know, what are you looking for in the extracurricular activities? That's kind of what they're looking for. How did you spend your time? What did you do in that time that kind of created an opportunity for leadership, of creativity, impact, service? You know, that's what they're looking at. So it's not like, oh, Model UN is the answer, or debate is the answer, or playing the flute is the answer. None of those are the answer, but how you approach that and what you're doing is a way to show that. So all of our questions are opportunities for you to share that story. There's some good questions here. Okay, when should you do the initial view interview? An optimal time. So we actually offer something called the junior interview. And so if you're a sophomore, if you're a 10th grader or an 11th grader, I would say that it might be a good idea to do what we call a junior interview or a practice interview. And it's the same kind of process. So you get familiar with using the technology. You get to talk to a stranger, which is sometimes better than talking to your parent or your counselor or a teacher who already knows you. And it's an opportunity to do that exploration process that we were talking about during the talk today. Because I think like we're so caught up in like, oh, everybody else is doing this, so I should do this. But when you actually have a conversation with someone and you realize what makes you excited and what makes you not want to talk anymore. So one example I always give is I had a student come in, maybe it was August of her senior year, and she came out of the interview, she said, I don't actually really like economics. I thought I liked economics, but when the teacher was asking me all the questions, I didn't really want to talk about it. And it was an eye-opening experience for her because she actually went back and said, maybe I need to reevaluate what I actually want to study. And, you know, she even said during the interview, when we started talking about anthropology is when I got really excited. And so that exploration process was really great for her. And since she did it in August, she was able to kind of go back, think about her list, and then in November, do the interview again and have a much better sense of who she was. So if you want to do it in 10th and 11th grade because you want to just have that experience, I recommend the junior interview. We also have somebody, and a former admissions officer will give you video feedback about how you did in your interview, and they might give you some tips on what to consider, how maybe you didn't talk in detail about something that they would have loved to hear, or maybe it's just you need to, you know, make sure you're making eye contact with the interviewer and engaging. Maybe you're reading something or you're memorizing something, and that's not a good idea. So that's great feedback. Now, if you have a great counselor, great teacher, great friends who are able to go through that process with you, you can do that as well. For the actual application, my recommendation is to do the interview about a month before your applications are due, because you want to make sure that's all done and submit it right when you submit your application. Let's see, how do you prepare? The best way to prepare is, again, to ask yourself a lot of questions. I mean, the recommendation earlier about writing stuff down, that's a great first way of just being like, what excites me? What's the first thing I wake up thinking about in the morning and the last thing I think about when I go to bed? You know, what do my friends say about me? That's a really good way to start to prepare, because then you're really kind of thinking about who you are. Now, one thing that I would caution you not to do is find a list of interview questions and then try to come up with an answer for every one of them and memorize. That doesn't ever work. Instead, you, again, want to think about the goals. I would start with 3 things. Academics, like what's one academic thing that you are really proud of, excited about, want to keep studying? Think about one extracurricular. How do I spend my time outside of class? You know, and think about that. And then think about one personality trait. Now, somebody just asked, like, does personality impact? Yes, personality does impact things because, like the admissions officer said, they're trying to build a community. So if everyone is a certain personality, everyone is a type A and leader type, and nobody is a follower, that's not a great community. If, you know, some people, if everybody is a talker, then nobody else is listening. So that's not a good thing either. So those of you who are worried, thinking, I'm not a good public speaker, I'm not an extrovert, that doesn't matter. Because one, you're not performing in front of anyone. You're talking to one person. And so all of you should be able to talk to one person. That's what college is. You know, you're going to be engaging in a community. It doesn't mean that you have to be bubbly and talking. In fact, for extroverts like me, the thing that I would say in preparation is slow down, take a minute. Extroverts like me tend to talk about a lot of things that are not important. So you want to rein back and just have a friend to kind of give you feedback. You're kind of talking on and on, pause for a second and listen for a follow-up question. And if you are less of a talker, then you might need a friend to be like, okay, give me a little bit more, because you want the interviewer to be able to ask you a follow-up question. That is the key thing to remember about initial view. It is a back and forth conversation. It is never going to be question, answer, next question, answer. It is question, answer, follow-up question, follow-up answer. Like, we're going to dig a little bit deeper because we want to give you that opportunity to share the full story and not just what's your favorite subject, math. We want to know a little bit more about, okay, lots of people like math, how has math impacted your life? What do you want to do next with it? That kind of thing. Somebody's asking, how often is Tuesday Talks? We are doing one, a lot of times it's once a week. We're going to take a break because of May holiday, but we generally do it once a week. If you go to initialview.com/Tuesday Talks, I'll put it in the chat here. You'll see the current schedule. Next week, we're going to have a mini fair with some colleges in the Boston area. So they'll talk a little bit about Boston, but then they're going to break out into rooms, and you'll actually get to be able to turn on your cameras and talk to admissions officers there. That's going to be a fun one. I would come back on May 9th because that one is going to be a case study, and that'll be really fun to be able to look at some applications and how an admissions officer kind of talks through one. Let's see. Great, these are good questions. Okay, if you're applying for transfer, same process for initial view. It's another, the timing might be a little bit later than normal, but yes, you just do the interview. We make sure that it's one interview, and then you do it for as many schools as you want. We don't want you to try to contort yourself to a specific school. So we're not going to ask you specific questions about specific schools. That gives you the liberty to be able to just be completely yourself. And so if you are a transfer student and you're going through the initial review process, just expect that we probably will have some question related to why do you want to transfer? What are you hoping for in your new environment and your new experience? And so if you're applying to multiple schools in the transfer, of course, you do not have to talk about like, I want to go to a specific school because but instead you can kind of talk about your current experience. You were hoping for something, it's not quite there, and you're looking for a community that will provide, or a professor that will provide, or a program that will provide, etc. But otherwise, the conversation is just much more just about who you are and what gets you excited about life. Wonderful. Any other questions? I'm going to hang on for maybe, like 5 more minutes. But if there are no more questions, I'll let everybody go. And if you need to go, you can go as well. Of this session, and it'll be either on our archives and or our YouTube channel. So if you are from China, we'll have a, we always have kind of an article, follow-up article on our WeChat account as well that you can read and pass on to your family and friends. Any question is okay. It doesn't have to be about interviews. If you have other questions, you're welcome to ask. I may not have the answers because I'm not an admissions officer myself, but I do talk to a lot of admissions officers and counselors. I do enjoy talking to admissions officers, which is why I continue to host Tuesday Talks. And there are, these April only has 2 talks, but in May, we're actually back to back 3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row, and there's going to be some good talks. And if you have feedback you want to give us, please do. You can email us at contact@initialview.com. And just give feedback on like what kind of talks you want to hear about, what kind of advice you would like to have. We might already have some talks in our archives that we might recommend to you. But I'm always happy to kind of give feedback to admissions officers on what kind of things you want to hear about. All of our socials whether it's WeChat or Instagram or WhatsApp. You can just find us. If you search for Initial View, you'll be able to find us there. Wonderful. Let's see, just making sure I got all of the questions. Biggest mistake in Initial View is reading answers. And it goes back to the authenticity. Like admissions officers really want to feel like they're getting to know you and not a packaged you, not somebody else's version of you. They want to be able to imagine what you're like in the classroom and what you're like on campus. So if you're reading something, that feels weird, because if you were to go to campus, you're not going to be reading a script everywhere you walk. So don't read and don't memorize, because memorizing also feels a little bit like reading either. You can write out all the things that are important to you. And you want to remember to talk about and highlight, but then I would actually just kind of throw that piece of paper away, because it will distract you from listening to the interviewer, and you won't have like that organic, authentic conversation, which at the end of the day, like I'll tell you, sometimes 30 seconds is all it takes for an admissions officer to be like, ooh, that was like, that like sparked my interest. So you don't need to script out your answers. Somebody's asking a question about loans. I'm not the best person to ask about that, but that is good feedback for me. Maybe we'll have a financial aid session later on this year. And is the admission officer a full-time or part-time job? For most of these people, it's their full-time job, because in addition to reviewing your applications, they are doing recruiting. They are helping with communications. They are doing admitted student events. You heard from Solomon, he does college advising as well. So he as for the freshmen and sophomores at Duke. So there is a lot of work to be done. There are some people who read seasonally, and so they just read during the application season. But these people that just talked are full-time employees. And the final question of the evening, am I in a forest? I am based in Atlanta. Thank you for asking that question. I like it when we have some humanness in this conversation. I am in Atlanta, which some people call an urban forest. We are in a city, but there are many, many trees. And yes, my backyard has a lot of pine trees. So it does look like a forest. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for spending time with me this afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are. Always a delight to see familiar names in the attendees. Next week, I encourage you to come if you're interested at all in Boston, which is a very fun place to go to school. I went to school right outside of Boston, so I can attest it. If that's something that's interesting to you, I encourage you to come next week. We are going to make it more of a meeting style, so you will turn on your cameras, but that will be a great opportunity for you to get to know admissions officers. So thank you once again, and have a great day, great evening. Bye, everyone.